Introduction. The following will discuss what is meant by the terms self-culture and identity, as well as delve into the ways in which factors such as positionality, transition, and social capital impact formation of identity. It will discuss the importance of clarity in one's self-culture and identity in relation to the case study, as seen below. An 18-year-old female with autism is seeking guidance in relation to transitioning from school to her first job. She has been closely cared for by her parents and has had little to no outside influence other than those she interacts with during school due to her parents' overprotective nature. Those who have disabilities experience a greater level of separation from society, leading to crisis occurring in relation to their identity and view of self. Bond.org, 2017. Self-concept is derived from both humanistic and social psychology, which states that self-concept is the person's belief or perspectives of themselves. This includes their traits and attributions as well as what they view as self. Baumeister, 1999. Lewis, 1990, states that there are two key aspects to developing self-concept: the existential self, which is part of the self-awareness of one's own being and their own individuality and separateness from others, as well as their own sense of self in time, and categorical, which is the knowledge that as humans we are objects to the world. Different types of self include self-identity and self. Culture is seen as a wide collection of perspectives, values, and ideas which define a group or community. Howarth, 2011. Giddens, 2005, defines culture as the way we live our lives, the religious practices we take part in, the leisure activities we enjoy, fashion, media, and every factor of everyday life that are influenced by a person's cultural beliefs and practices. Giddens goes on to say that culture allows scope for change in society as the diversity and blurred lines amongst cultures allows social movement and shared commonalities. Identity. Kidd, 2011, defines identity as the process of becoming an individual and the conditions of such. Identity can be defined as the social relations, roles, traits, and group memberships that create who an individual is. It takes into account the past self, present self, and future self, what they want to become or feel they are expected to become. Leary and Tanguy, 2012. Erikson's theory of psychological development concludes there are 8 stages to psychological development of a healthy individual, and at each we encounter different wants and needs. For our case study, our young person would be at the level of identity versus confusion, meaning they are asking more questions around who they are and why they are the person they are. However, some have argued that Erikson fails to consider the differences between gender, whether or not females and males develop differently at different stages of the pathway. Franz and White. Bandura's social learning theory is how young people can be shaped by adults' influence on them through the means of such positive and negative reinforcement. The problem with this is that it places almost all development of young people in the hands of others and tends to discredit the ideals of the individual being capable of making their own choices in life. Muro and Jeffries, 2008. This theory counteracts Erikson's theory by saying that identity is formed through interactions rather than a process caused by human biology as the young person grows. Bandura. However, both do state that when the young person has a negative experience within their early years, that this will have an impact on the development of the young person, thus leading to potential identity crisis. In terms of our case study, we must implement both theories in order to gain a wider scope of understanding, as there is no correct way to measure and understand development. By collecting various methods, we can gain more clarity. Positionality is thus determined by where one stands in relation to the other. Miram et al. 2001. Burke, 2014, argues that positionality is who you are, how you are perceived by others, and the implications of this perception. In terms of the case study, we must consider that young people with disabilities are categorized by those around them and treated in a certain way. Many perceive those with disabilities as less capable. When this occurs, people may automatically treat them as such, which can have a major implication on their views of self and their development. Young people in society are often viewed as lesser in terms of personality, meaning that their identity and view of self can be underdeveloped due to having a lower role in society. Due to this, young people's voices also often go unheard, creating conflict and lack of willingness to share ideas from fear or anger of being potentially ignored because of their position in society. Coolhan and Bryden Miller, 2004. Transition. There are three types of transition. In this case study, we'll be focusing on school to work transition of the young person, Coles 2005. When underpinning transition of a young person, one of the major barriers is their attachment style. In this case, the young person's attachment style may be ambivalent, due to being mollycoddled through her life by her parents. She is reliant on them in some manners, but resistant to them in the same breath, Ainsworth and Bowlby. This leads to difficulties in creating a no-risk culture due to the young person having had everything sorted and handled by her parents, Nichol, 2017. She is more likely to expect the world to be easy due to this, causing major culture shock when she enters the workplace and no longer has her parents to rely on. Another barrier to transition is stubborn refusal, in which the young person resists the need for transition through fear of change or anger, thus leading to a potential stagnation in their development. When faced with uncertainty, it is often found young people will fight against the forces leading up to this, such as moving schools, in order to protect themselves. Allen and O'Connor. It is important and the right of the young person to be resistant. We must consider whether transition is something that happens once or if it is continuous throughout life. Some authors state that transition is a constant state as society changes often and the life experiences of young people are ever changing through means such as education and social media. Beresford, 2004. We are constantly going through different phases of life, and at each, a certain amount of transition is required. Youth cultures. Youth culture refers to a group of a certain ages cultural expressions of their values and identities, as well as their belonging as a member of the group, which is separate to that of the adult world. Kliskey and Simpson. With the extension of the age category of youth and the expansion of the ideals around different subcultures of youth culture, it has caused a grey area in defining what we class as youth culture and what is authentic expression of this culture. Hall and Jefferson, 1976. The concept of hegemony by Gramsci alludes that the cultural practices of young people is important mannerisms in which resistance to culture and dominant ideas evolve. Willis, 1978, states that the connection between socio-economical and cultural upbringings of the young people influence the type of subcultures young people create. Jones argues that the ways young people categorize into subcultures can leave them disadvantaged in certain walks of life, such as work and education. An example of this in relation to the case study would be the young person with disabilities is more likely to be educated around other young people with disabilities, forming a subcultural norm. Therefore, when entering her workplace, she may face adversity in socialization with others. Young people need to be able to make their own choices about culture. As youth workers, we are able to aid this process by giving them an open space to express their views of self and the ways in which they fit into society. The role of youth and community workers. It is key that in order to help young people who are struggling with their identity, that youth workers provide an open and safe space for discussion and expression. Without safe spaces in which to share, young people are repressed and at risk of not reaching their full potential, leading to health issues, both mental and physical. Croix. Through providing information, youth workers are aiding the development of the young person's sense of self on an individual level and in relation to the world around them. Priok, Dofella, and Eden. Through discussion, we can develop a deeper understanding of the individual's progression and their ideals, as well as what they aim to gain from the work. The role of the youth worker in terms of self-culture and identity is not to enforce our own values and opinions upon young people, but to give them the tools enabled to make their own informed choices. We cannot simply tell young people what to do with their lives, but instead allow them to choose their own path and serve as a guide on their journey. As youth workers, it is detrimental to our practice that we are aware of different factors and theories that underpin identity and are conscious of how this impacts the lives of young people. It is not as simple as to say one certain factor affects the whole of the young person's identity, but rather is a makeup of a much wider scope than is visible to the naked eye. As youth workers, we must be constantly revisiting and updating our knowledge of identity, self, and culture in order to provide the best assistance to young people, all the time remembering it is not our journey to take. Instead, we must leave the complete control in the hands of the young person.